goes without saying that diet can play a massive role in women's health and definitely can play a massive role in what's going on with your thyroid and your hormones. So I wanted to kind of go over this a little bit more in depth because I know it's very confusing trying to figure out what foods to eat, what's healthy for the thyroid, and healthy for our hormones, and kind of things that we should avoid. So I thought maybe this would kind of help put it all together for you and make it a little bit easier. So one thing to keep in mind is that when we're thinking about what's the best diet or the best foods that are for our thyroid health, it's really all about eating real whole foods. Okay, we want to prepare them the right way as well, because if we're completely obliterating our food and we're frying it too much and not doing the appropriate things with our food, that can also make a big difference. Some foods are better cooked and soaked and sprouted. One thing that I did want to mention, even like cruciferous vegetables, so cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, things like that. There's a lot of misinformation about them saying that they are absolutely terrible for the thyroid. And they're actually not very good for the thyroid if you're eating them raw. And that's the thing to remember. If you're cooking them, they're totally fine. They're actually very nutritious. They have things in them that can actually help you detox estrogen as well. So I really, really like cooked cruciferous vegetables, but you got to make sure they're cooked. And you can get a lot of benefits from them, but it's the raw ones that are actually can cause issues. It can be goitrogenic and cause a lot of issues for the thyroid. So I don't recommend them raw. One simple rule to kind of follow that might help you as well is ask yourself from, looking at a food, was this food around 150 plus years ago? If yes, then you probably can eat it. If it's no, then you might want to think about, okay, what is in this food that maybe I shouldn't be eating this? So a quick list of foods that are really, really good to enjoy for our thyroid and for our hormones as well. Fruits and vegetables, it goes without saying, those are always very beneficial. And like I mentioned, cruciferous vegetables are fine. Just make sure they're cooked. And then, of course, healthy fats. So I like things like grass-fed butter, ghee, coconut oil, avocado oil, even olive oil. These are all really, really good sources of fats. Now, obviously, we can get fats coming from our meats and our proteins that we're eating as well. Pasture-raised meats are your best bet because it doesn't have as many things in them as far as the animals go. They're not fed with hormones and all these things. So I always really try to preference pasture-raised and organic protein sources, and eggs as well. Same thing. Now, I also wanted to mention this. For some people that have, let's say Hashimoto's, where we have this autoimmune component of thyroid stuff, they sometimes cannot tolerate dairy at all, including eggs. So just keep that in mind. That's very person dependent. But, blankly, most people can tolerate eggs, but not everyone can, especially when we have Hashimoto's. Sometimes they can be an issue. And then sometimes you just have to cut them out and reintroduce them. Organ meats are really, really good. I really like organ meats, liver especially. I think they're fantastic. Really, really a lot of benefits for them for our thyroid as well. Wild seafood, I always make sure that the seafood that you have, that you eat is wild, because when they're farm raised, it's no different than when you're getting like beef or something and it's not pasture raised. It's going to have all these hormones and all these things injected into the fish. So make sure it's wild seafood. If you are having dairy, the least processed, the better. Okay, so raw is really good. Organic, definitely make sure it's organic as well. Those are kind of your best bets. Now, again, not everyone tolerates dairy. I do not tolerate dairy. I never have, and my body just does not tolerate it at all. So I stay away from it. But I have a lot of clients that I work with that they even have Hashimoto's and they totally tolerate dairy just fine. So again, person dependent with that one. Nuts and seeds, I really, really like. I think they have a really good place in the diet, but make sure that like if you're having them, they're soaked, sprouted, things like that, because they'll break down a little bit better when you digest them and it's much easier on your stomach. So I do like them. I just think that they're better when they're soaked and sprouted and things like that. Legumes, I wanted to mention, not everyone tolerates legumes. That is another category where some people do not tolerate legumes. So just be mindful. And grains, same thing, okay? Not everyone tolerates grains. I have a lot of clients that I've worked with that they do not tolerate things like quinoa and rice and stuff like that. So pay attention to that if you're having them and you're like, you know what, I'm not tolerating them, get them out for a while, okay? But there are some really good benefits to them. The fiber in them is really, really good. Also, things, when we're thinking about sweeteners, what kind of sweeteners are your best bet? I like raw honey. I like maple syrup. The least processed, the better. Stevia in moderation, I think, is okay as well, and monk fruit, stuff like that. But the more natural, so honey and maple syrup, they're more natural, the better for that, okay? So, of course, one other thing I did want to mention is, avoiding processed foods as much as you possibly can. Keep an eye on sugar content and things. A lot of people, don't have gluten, and they'll go buy a whole bunch of gluten-free products, and then they don't realize that all the other ingredients in that are just as bad as eating the gluten. So really watch. You got to do a lot of label reading. Watch that. If you're having gluten-free stuff, look at it, because a lot of times they'll still have sugar in it. Sometimes they put like cornstarch, which can have the kind of almost cross-contamination as gluten for a lot of people. I know, like, I can't have gluten. I'm very sensitive to it, and corn does the same thing to me. So really watch the ingredients and do a lot of label reading, because that's going to be, especially with this gluten-free products, you'll notice on these, there's a lot of stuff in there that you're like, I don't even know what that is. Probably shouldn't eat it then, okay? So sticking to real whole foods. Perimeter of the grocery store is going to be your best friend. That's going to be the whole idea of eating for your thyroid and eating for your hormones, is to eat more of the perimeter of the grocery store. So I would get most of your foods coming from there. That's what I do. Do I still have, I love Siete. They have great gluten-free products. I have things like that once in a while. But most of my food's going to come from the perimeter of the grocery store. And then, of course, adding on healthy fats. If I'm having, liter cuts of meat, then I'll add on healthy fats. So that's kind of the whole idea that I would kind of stick to when we were thinking about that. And again, remember I said, pay attention to, if you're like, was this food around 150 years ago? If it wasn't, is that really going to benefit me? And then, accordingly from that, what you tolerate and what you don't tolerate. Because if you have a food sensitivity, and you do, just because it's a healthy food, you don't want to have that then, okay? So let me know if you have any questions. If you're still confused, by the way, you're like, I have no idea what those foods should look like, and you want a really good list of foods, I do have a thyroid-friendly grocery guide. I have, just drop a comment below and I will make sure I get that sent over to you. It's a whole list of like thyroid-friendly foods, and then I also go a step further if you're like, I really want to double down on getting my inflammation down, or get my thyroid antibodies to come down, or improve my thyroid health and hormone health overall. It goes a step further, and you can, it's a kind of like a 30-day, it's restrictive, that's what it's designed for, but it's only 30 days long. So I have kind of the whole list, 2 different options for you in that guide. So like I said, if you want that guide, just comment below and I will make sure I get that sent over to you. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye.